Thank you for watching Pappy's Ponderings. My hope is that you will be blessed by today's ponderings. It is my belief that the Creator of all things knows what's best for His creation, and He has given us His words to help us live by, to give us the best life here on earth and in eternity. So let's ponder some of His words today.
And he said, A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found.
This has been one of my favorite sections of the Bible. There are so many lessons that can be taken from it, but today I want to ponder it from a totally different point of view than I think I've ever have before or ever heard. In a word, consequences. I'd like to think about this young man who decided that waiting for his inheritance was much too difficult. He made a decision. I want it now. He told his father, who reluctantly agreed to give him his share of his inheritance. And with his money, he left for a distant land. His choice eventually determined the conditions of his life, which were as follows. Jesus explained that the young man quickly lived up his inheritance, spending it basically on selfish desires. Now, Webster defines consequence as something produced by a cause or necessarily following from a set of conditions. So what does that mean to you and I? Our choices in life produce the eventual conditions of our life, which inevitably result in certain consequences which you or I may bitterly dislike but cannot cancel. Here's a couple examples. A person abuses his or her body with a substance such as alcohol or drugs. The result? A body which sustains liver damage. The consequences, living in pain or facing possible surgery. Or a person that uses his or her body in immoral ways. The consequences, living with some disease or having to raise a child in less than optimal home life. This is a hard truth, and I suppose more and more find it too harsh to teach our young ones and seem not to even want to accept this truth ourselves. But I believe it's so very incorrect. We must be teaching this to all those that we love. For God teaches us over and over about consequences. Think about Adam and Eve being forced out of God's presence due to their consequences. Genesis 3. Or Samson, following his personal desires, gave up the symbol of his dedication to God, his Nazarite uncut hair, and then the Lord had left him due to his consequences, in Judges 16. And now from our reading in Luke, when the young man's money was gone and his friends deserted him, he had to take employment as a pig farmer, which was the worst possible job for a Jew. If you remember, they had nothing to do with pigs. Now, I'm sure he didn't foresee all of this when he said to his dad that he wanted half the money and I want it now. But he should have and could have. As free moral agents, that's where we often go wrong. We don't think beyond the immediate. We also don't want to face the consequences of our decisions, often making excuses for our entitlement hearts, if you will. Listen to the phrase in the story. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death?" He came to his senses. It's amazing how hunger and danger clears your mind and helps you realize what a stupid thing you've been doing. That's when we want to go back and start all over. Sadly, in America, Satan keeps so many of us in a very prosperous lifestyle, and we don't even realize just how low our spiritual life really is. In this story, the young man repented, did an about-face, if you will, and came home. So he came to himself, and then he came home. Which is great that he was able to make this decision and come home before it was too late. However, did he escape the consequences of his action? Not really. The family's fortune had been reduced by 50%. His brother was angered. His father's heart was broken. Yes, the father forgave him, which speaks of the largeness of God's grace towards us. But he had to live with the memory of his failure and his broken relationships with his brother. Can we learn from this parable or other examples God's given us? Can we learn from our mistakes and failures of others? Or are we condemned to make the mistakes that so many have made before us? After all, we're too smart to reap those consequences, right? There is a way that seemeth right to a man, Proverbs 16:25, which quickly adds, but the end, it leads to death. Never forget your choices in life produce the circumstances which, for good or evil, bear certain consequences. It's still true today and always will be so. Thanks again for joining me in these biblical ponderings. If you like these ponderings, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and feel free to share them.